I first saw Srila Prabhupada at the Auckland University in New Zealand. It was sometime in April 1972. I was studying there, studying philosophy. One morning I was walking through the grounds of the university, and I heard coming from my right-hand side a sound like little bells ringing. Intriguing sound. So I looked across to the right, and there, who should I see? Maybe 15, 20 meters away from me, something like that, was Srila Prabhupada. And he was walking along in a very regal way with his head back, kind of bright, effulgent saffron clothes, silk clothes, walking basically in my direction. On either side, there were young ladies in saris. Each one had a bowl of rose petals, red rose petals. They were dancing very rhythmically and very gently and beautifully on either side of Prabhupada. And as they're dancing, they're throwing the rose petals under his feet. And I saw this sight. It was such a sight. And the thought just popped into my head, this must be like heaven. So then Prabhupada was walking towards me. Behind him, there was a small group, maybe 6 or 7 other devotees, disciples, some young men, couple of young ladies. And the young men had shaved heads. At the time I had long hair. And I saw these young men with shaved heads. And I thought, oh, that's not so good. Anyway, Prabhupada just walked right past me and the group of devotees. The bells were cartels, of course. And there was a little stage, just a very small stage, just maybe 20 or 30 meters away in the main quadrangle area in the university, just near the cafeteria. And Prabhupada sat down there, and the devotees sat with him, and Prabhupada led a kirtan. It was at that point when Prabhupada was singing that I recognized, oh, this is Hare Krishna, because I had heard of Hare Krishna. I hadn't met any devotees, seen any. I didn't really know what it meant other than it was from India. It was very cool because the Beatles were into it. And he started singing, and I realized, oh, this is Hare Krishna. And I actually thought, maybe he's Krishna. And then Prabhupada gave a talk, which was recorded, and it's been published in Back to Godhead. It's in the folio. Prabhupada's addressing the students. There's quite a group gathered there to hear him. And Prabhupada was saying, you are the flower of your country. Don't waste your lives. Do something useful with your lives. Become Krishna conscious. So that was the first experience I had the first time I saw Srila Prabhupada.
So I was in Manchester, and I had been going to the temple regularly. Prabhupada was very powerful for making devotees join the temple. So what happened was they had a temple in the house. And the landlady came on the wrong day, and they were having a stand-up kirtan on the first floor, so she gave them a month's notice. So all the brahmacharis and the books and everything that went with the temple moved into our flat. And then a month later, we got thrown out. So then I came down in a van with many, many people, actually, and we all joined the Manor 5 days after George Harrison had given it. So that was very exciting. It was like moving into Krishna's village. So after I'd been here just a couple of months, Srila Prabhupada came and stayed for 2.5 months. And that was very amazing. And that was when he arrived in the helicopter. And he came actually over the roof here and he landed on that back lawn. Apparently he didn't like it at all, the helicopter ride. It made him feel very ill. But it was very amazing because I had just joined a few months, and then I was realizing, well, I saw this person, you know, a year or so ago, and he was very amazing. But what if I don't feel the same when I see him again now? So we were actually, where the deities are now downstairs, the deities weren't there then because Prabhupada hadn't installed them. So it was actually open to the garden, like French windows. So we were all standing on the steps and we were singing, when Prabhupada came down, we were singing, we're going home back to Godhead, oh, we're all going home back to Godhead. And we were singing. Prabhupada came over the top and he waved like this. So then he landed on the lawn. And I was thinking, well, I'm dancing because everybody else is dancing, but what will I feel like when I see him? But when Prabhupada got out of that helicopter, it was very amazing. And for many years I didn't say these things because I thought they would think I was a Haji or something. But other people who were there, I heard them say it. So now I say, when Prabhupada got out of that helicopter, it was just incredible because he had like a halo, you could say, the whole way down to the bottom, and his feet were not touching the floor. And other people saw that. He was walking above the ground. It was very amazing. I never saw it before and I never saw it afterwards, but it was just, and I knew, I don't need to worry that I won't feel the same. I just saw this definitely as a really unusual person, completely from another planet, actually has come here to give us these amazing message and amazing methodology that we can perfect our lives. So that was also very amazing for me.
So this is what I wanted to speak, actually, because this is something that has had a lasting impression on my mind and heart, and probably the most important day in my life. I had joined the Pittsburgh temple, where Mahendra was the temple president at the time. I was a full-time student at the time, getting my master's degree, but because my university was across the street from the temple, they allowed me to stay in the temple. And 1 month after I had joined, they said, Prabhupada's coming, in great excitement. So we all jumped into vans and cars and we drove up to New York to meet Prabhupada at the JFK airport. And as different from this country, England, there we were allowed to have a raucous, rip-roaring kirtan. And we had a kirtan for about 45 minutes. A very loud, very joyful. And of course there were devotees from all over the East Coast, and I guess other parts as well, many devotees. And it was my first time to ever meet Srila Prabhupada. So all of a sudden, these double doors opened up, and Srila Prabhupada didn't walk, but appeared to me to be floating through. And as soon as I saw him, as soon as my eyes fell on him, this is the experience I had, which is hard to understand in three-dimensional life. But for me, it was like tears, which started in my toes and shot up my whole body, and then shot out like this. And in my mind, something was saying, he's a pure devotee of the Lord. Now, I didn't even know what that concept meant. I didn't have any idea, but that's what I understood at that point. And then I went into obeisances like everyone else in the room. And then after a little while, actually Prabhupada walked right in front of me. After a little while, I understood that everyone in the room was soaking wet like I was. And that was my first impression.
Well, I just met the devotees at a free festival with Vrndavan, and most of the stalwart English devotees, from that time, and I had a very powerful, life-changing experience. And they're all talking about this place that George Harrison had given a few months ago. So they were luring all these hippies to go there, and so. Literally 10 days later after this festival, and I was about to go to college, and I thought I'm going to go and see the devotees there. So I went to what was called Pigott's Manor, in those days. And I lived in southwest London, got on a bus, went to Watford, walked all the way through. And as I was walking, I was going, what's it going to be like? What are the people? Is it going to be... I had this imagination that it was going to be people making Vedic carvings and paintings and things. And it was, I arrived at the temple and this devotee went, Haribol! And I said, I met devotees at Winter Festival. He said, oh, put your bags here. And what's your name? Mark. And he says, would you like to go in the kitchen? And I went straight in the kitchen and washed pots. And I thought, why not? That's why I'm here. I come to do service. Now, what had happened, Prabhupada, as everyone knows, had spent a long time at the Manor since they got it that summer. And the devotees were very, very attached to Prabhupada. They'd been spoiled, really. And Prabhupada had just gone to Stockholm. And so when I arrived, he was in Stockholm. But a few days later, because I was, people were all, Prabhupada's coming, Prabhupada's coming. So I remember asking, what do you do when you see him? Do you bow down? What do you do? It was all kind of quite nerve-wracking. And then I remember, Prabhupada coming from the airport into the Manor in a white Mercedes, I think. And just the hullabaloo and the excitement and everything. And you couldn't get very near. And the first impression was, wow, he's really small. And I was only 16 and he was smaller than me. And he seemed to, because when I first saw him, he looked quite golden. And it was very brief. He went in and then went straight up to his room. And everyone had said, oh, Prabhupada's been traveling, he's very, very tired. And so the next day, didn't see Prabhupada. And I was sitting in the temple room doing my japa, closed eyes, didn't have any, I had all my mirrored Indian kaftan and my long hair. And suddenly, someone tapped me, and it was Vrndavan Swami with a big smile, put a garland over me, and he said, Prabhupada's going for a morning walk, you can go. I said, really, what do you do? And he said, it's easy, just go out the door and just, and walk down, he's just leaving now. So that's what I did. I just ran out, and then there was this, as you go out of the Manor, down the village of Lechmore Heath, there was just 10 devotees. I was very humbly at the back, hardly anybody talking. Prabhupada wasn't in a chitter-chatty mood. I just remember that, the cane. And then somebody trying to talk, and Prabhupada going, yes. He wasn't really talking. And then it's quite shady because of the trees of the road. And we came out of the village, came into a field, and we stopped, and then just Prabhupada, this is suddenly where I'm right next to Prabhupada. And he looks and he did a scan around. And I couldn't look at Prabhupada. I was very demure and I went down there. But soon I looked, and I just remember looking and going, is he really here? It was so, the aura, not like this kind of, but the energy was just so palpable. And he was so extraordinarily exotic. The long ears, and he looked really golden now in that morning sunlight. And he just looked, and that was the first kind of close-up look. And then we went back, and then there was the morning program and the official Guru Puja, basically. And I have to admit, I couldn't understand Prabhupada's language, and he would crack jokes, and he was very light. And I remember kind of like all the devotees laughing, and I go, I had no idea what everyone was laughing about. And I had this devotee Duranga, who was like my bhakta leader or looking after me. And each day during the Guru Puja, the devotees would line up on one side, Prabhupada would be on the Vyasasana, and you would kind of cross over and people would line, somebody would have a basket of flowers. And I was resisting the actual act of submission. I was watching it. Then on the kind of last day when he was there, Duranga kind of pushed me out, and I couldn't go back. So I went, okay, and I walked over and joined and as the queue was getting lesser, I was getting closer and closer, and I was going, the import of what I was doing was just dawning on me. I'd gone from being, in 1 year, from being totally not into God, into spiritual things, and then meeting devotees, having amazing experiences. So this whole thing of just even accepting God, what to speak of a guru, was quite a big thing for me. And so as I came up, I remember getting the flowers. And again, this demureness that you couldn't look Prabhupada in the eyes. You were just, with all humility, I offered my flowers and did what everybody else did mechanically, laid down in front, and I didn't know prayers. And I just said, I don't know what to say, but in my mind, but please accept me as your disciple. I accept you as my guru. And as I walked away to join the kirtan, I have to say, a rush came all over my body, up to here. And the kirtan that day was just the bit. I mean, I've been there for a few days. The kirtan was just incredible and ecstatic. Now, there's a few people differ in this memory, because I've read Ranshaw's book, but in my memory, part of the Guru Puja was Charanara Vindam, and he used to go off and collect an amazing flower and do this incredible dance in front of Prabhupada. Prabhupada loved it. He did this dance, and he kind of offered the flower, and then Prabhupada offered the kind of flower back to the devotees. And I was feeling very, very, it was the first time of being in the company of devotees where I was feeling ecstatic. And then basically Prabhupada kind of got off the Vyasasan and kind of went out the door and got in the car and left for India. That was my first vision of Prabhupada. And I didn't see Prabhupada again until he came to Europe, because I went and became a devotee in Amsterdam, and he visited Schloss Rettershof.
So I met the devotees in 1975, joined in 1976. So I was a new devotee living at the temple, and still getting used to all the devotee ways. And then all of a sudden, Prabhupada's coming, Prabhupada's coming. The buzz went round the temple. So we got very excited, you know, in the build-up. I was in the ladies' Sankirtan party at the time. So I was one of the privileged ones that could go to the airport to see Prabhupada come in. So we dashed off, got to the airport, and we were waiting in the airport lounge for Prabhupada to come. So there was probably about 20 or so devotees, 20, 25. And there was such an ecstatic kirtan, because we were all very much eager to see Srila Prabhupada. I'd read Prabhupada's books just a year before, and had been convinced straight away that this is something really special, something I'd been looking for. And now here I was going to meet my spiritual master. So, you know, the excitement was really building up. Very ecstatic kirtan. We weren't really aware of anything else going on in the airport. We were just, eyes were fixed on the place where Prabhupada was going to come through. And then all of a sudden he was there. This wonderful, glowing personality, flanked by these great big American devotees, and glided through. So as soon as we saw him, you know, it fell flat on the floor. But we didn't want to stay there too long, because we didn't want to take our gaze off him. And we watched him as he glided by and was whisked away in a car, you know. So off we went. We followed after. We rushed to our van, got in the van, and then drove back as fast as we could to the temple. Want to see Prabhupada again, you know. It was very strong emotions were there at the time. I think we all, tears in the eyes. It was wonderful. So we drove back to the Manor as quick as we could, but of course we were later back than Prabhupada, so we were right, we snuck in the back. Prabhupada's rooms, I don't know if many of you will have been there to Prabhupada's rooms, beautiful Srila Prabhupada's rooms at the Bhaktivedanta Manor. And so sneaked in at the back and just sat down quietly in the corner, because Prabhupada would have already sitting there behind his low desk, looking around the room, smiling at everyone, speaking. To be quite honest, I can't even remember what he said now. It was just being in the presence that was so important. One thing I remember about that time quite strongly was they brought Srila Prabhupada in a plate, a large platter of fruits and sweets. So Srila Prabhupada sat there at his desk, looked over the sweets, very, always very elegant. So he picked up a piece of apple and proceeded to eat the apple, chewing like that. Then all of a sudden he started spitting out onto the floor. He just spat onto the floor, you know, the peel from the apple. I was quite shocked, really, because I was a new devotee at that time. I was, like anyone coming from England, you know, we're very polite, and you just wouldn't do that in a company of people around you like that. On reflection afterwards, what I saw that was Srila Prabhupada was so self-assured, so confident, so authentic. He wasn't trying to impress anybody. He wasn't trying to prove anything to anyone. he was who he was. He was grounded, he was centered, and that's what you did. Actually, there was a sheet on the carpet, so after the program, this would be taken up and thrown away anyway, so actually it was okay. But at the time I was very shocked. How could he do that, you know? So that was one of the first memories of Srila Prabhupada, being with him at that time.
Well, we'd left Bhaktivedanta Manor early in the morning and we drove to Heathrow Airport. There were only 2 cars at the Manor, a brown Escort and my little Morris Minor. And another car arrived from London, a big black car to pick up Prabhupada. But when we got to the airport, there was many devotees there. And there was a kirtan, and this is in the arrivals, Terminal 3, I believe. And the room was packed with devotees. And we were all chanting, and we waited and waited, and Prabhupada came through, and it was like I'd never seen. This was like seeing the ambassador of another galaxy. He was radiant, glowing, the biggest smile on his face, and everyone dived on the floor. All the cordon rails, all the ropes and ashtrays, everything went flying. And the security didn't know what was happening. They just stood there completely awestruck. And then I first saw Prabhupada. And I knew, after having read yoga books, Vivekananda, Baba Ramdas, I had to follow Srila Prabhupada. So then we drove off in the vehicles, and Brahmananda got in my car. And in the car, we had, there was a plate of Mahaprasad, and they were passing it round, and I was the driver, so I didn't see what it was, and they came from the back seat, and they said, now, you have some of this, and reach over, and I reached in the bowl, took a bite, and I was driving along, and suddenly my hair stood on end, and my face broke out into sweat. I was just eating into raw ginger. I didn't even know what ginger root was. And I was driving like this, trying to stay on the seat. And no one noticed that I'd eaten raw ginger, but my face was as red as a beetroot and sweating all the way back to the manor.
Whenever Srila Prabhupada would come, it would always be like all the devotees start painting the temple and everything, cleaning and just chaos. We were making these arches in front of the deities. The ladies were painting very beautiful gold decorations in front of Radha Persishwar. And by the time Prabhupada was coming from the airport, the arches were still wet, and they were going in front of the deities, and that's how rushed it was. And so I wanted to go to the airport. I'd never seen Srila Prabhupada. And so I asked Bhagavan, can I please go to the airport? And Bhagavan said, no, there's too much to do. So I burst into tears. And he said, oh, go, I can't stand seeing women cry, just go. So I got in the back of the van. We all, we had drivers and no seats in the back, and we all just piled in, and we go to the airport. And I remember, to me, it seemed to be an escalator, like Prabhupada coming down on the airport, and like looking larger than life. And the kirtan, of course, was building up to crescendo. And then when Srila Prabhupada he was like descending, and he looked so big, and he had all these beautiful garlands all around his neck, and he was glowing, he was so effulgent. And as he was coming down, by the time he came to where I was, he was only just a touch taller than me. He was quite short, but he was enormous. And I just cried. Unstoppable. I just could not stop crying. It was, I was a little bit of an anarchist before. I wouldn't surrender much to any authority before I was a devotee. We were with the provost in Amsterdam, and to actually surrender to a spiritual master was like, to surrender to anybody. But Srila Prabhupada, somehow or other, even having not seen him, he had taken a big place in my heart, and I wanted to give up whatever I needed to give up for him. And so as he was standing there, it was like my heart, oh, I shouldn't, microphone. My heart just knew that this is the person that is safe to give my life to. That if I want to give my heart and I want to give my life to a person, then this is the personality that I want to do it to. And that realization that here was my eternal spiritual master was very overwhelming.
The first time I saw Srila Prabhupada was in Vrndavan. It was in 1975, the same year that the temple opened. So I just arrived in Vrndavan and the night before, and then the next morning I was asked to help to clean Srila Prabhupada's rooms while he was out for his morning walk, to clean some paraphernalia, some brass, lotus and things like this. So by the time we finished doing all the cleaning, we ran to the temple, and it was just, we were a little bit late for the curtains opening. So the devotees were already taking darshan. And we came in, if you know the Krishna Balaram temple, we came in from the side door, not the front door, but the side door next to Radhashama Sundar, where the pujaris go in and out. So we were just standing there, and Prabhupada was taking darshan of Radhashama Sundar. He was offering his prayers, he was offering his obeisances, and then praying to their lordship. So Prabhupada was taking darshan of Radha and Krishna, and I was taking darshan of Prabhupada. And it was an amazing experience. That was my first darshan of Prabhupada, and I was just really overwhelmed by his purity, his devotion, and he was just so effulgent and radiant. So at that point, I knew that this was my spiritual master, who I'd been looking for so many lifetimes, and he was standing right there in front of me. And at that point, I just surrendered in my heart to him there and then. And it was wonderful.
I go back home, I meet my girlfriend, Joanna, who's also on a spiritual journey. And just so happened we were in school together. So we're doing all of the usual things of that period. Autobiography of a yogi, Hermaness, Theosophy, TM. We started doing TM, but for me, nothing felt fine. It wasn't quite right. I was looking in the right area, I felt intuitively, but I hadn't found what I wanted. And then one day, Joanna, off her bookshelf in her flat, handed me a book, the Topmost Yoga System, Krishna Consciousness, Topmost Yoga System, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. I open the book, I read the first page, and my body goes into vibrating. I have found, I didn't say my spiritual master, I said this person knows the truth. I didn't know there was a movement, a mission, anything to join. That hadn't factored into my thinking at this stage. Just that A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada was a real, genuine master. So a couple of months later, I'm in London visiting Joanna at art college. And I'm near the British Museum, and I walk down Berry Place, and I pass the Radhakrishna temple. And on the steps of the temple is a devotee inviting everyone in. I go in, and I see the photograph of A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. So immediately I've made the connection. They invite me upstairs. Tribhuvannath, it was. Sit down and they start to preach to me, and then Sarvamangala brings me a plate of cabbage. It's cold, dripping cabbage, the kind of thing at school. It's got to get off the school meals. So they're giving me cabbage, and I take a spoon. Wow, this cabbage is amazing. Prasad. So I didn't know any of this at the time. So I've come across the Radha Krishna temple. I know it is A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. I go back to my hometown. And Tribhuvannath is sending me magazines, and I'm thinking about it. I mean, with hindsight, I was probably more of a Namahata member than a monk. Anyway, Christmas comes, and I'm in a club with my friends, and one of them says to me, "So you've dropped out of university, what are you going to do?" And out of my mouth came, "I'm going to join the Hare Krishna temple." Wow, where did that come from? Now, I hadn't planned that. It came out.
The Gurudas was so nice, and the devotees were so nice on their Sankirtan on Oxford Street. They invited me back to the Petterton Street to have some prasad, some eat, etc., etc., etc. No pressure, and one thing led to another, basically. You know, I was feeling there was no pressure at all. Like 1 hour on Monday, then a week later it was like 2 hours. Then another week it was like 3 hours. You know, so it grew. You know, and so when I did meet Srila Prabhupada at Ascot, they said to me, "Oh, we're going to Ascot to see our spiritual teacher. Do you want to come?" And I said, "Okay, no problem." You know, I just took it very calmly. You know, no big deal. You know, nothing special. Anyway, but. Anyway, the thing was that as soon as I met him, he was just sitting very calmly, very quietly, very peacefully in a tranquil pose. My knees just gave way, and I literally, instead of just bowing, I collapsed. I was really, really nervous. I thought, oh my God, you know, my goodness, you know, his aura, despite the fact that he was in a damp, cold room, his aura was just gold shine. He was shining, you know. There was like rays coming off his body. That's the effect it had on me, you know. I don't know how to describe it. People say, you know, they have God experiences when they take LSD, you know, but that's neither here nor there anyway. But my mouth was dry, I was just speechless, and the only thing that went through my head at that moment was that this is what I've been looking for all my life, with not a single word being said. It was just body language, silent body language. And I think it was Mukunda or introduced me to Srila Prabhupada and said to him, "This is Raz, my material name. He's been coming to the temple for a few days and taking an interest." And Srila Prabhupada said to me, "So which country are you from?" I said, "I was born in Pakistan." And he said, "So you come from a Muslim family?" And I said, "Yes, Srila Prabhupada." And he said, "Well, we don't have any Muslim disciples in the movement, so maybe you can be the first. And that's why I was named Jai Hari. It was after Haridas Thakur, because he was the first Muslim disciple of Lord Chaitanya, as it were. And it was one of those situations. But even now, I'm older, my private life, my personal life, my business life is centered around what I've learned from being in his presence. And what he was to me was the father I never had. I mean, he could see me, look me in the eyes, and know exactly what I was going through, whether I was frustrated, whether I was tired, whether I was feeling anxious, whether I was feeling happy. He knew. He could just look into my eyes and he knew.
I like this interview because it's the format of which is to tell our experiences of the lesson we have heard from, learned from Srila Prabhupada. So the first one, to me, it's a small story. However, it's all to do with pride, and I'm all about pride. So when I got my Gayatri, there was no pujari in Amsterdam, so all the devotees before Prabhupada had performed the fire yagya, and all of us sat around it, and we had the ceremony. And Prabhupada was going to give personally the Gayatri mantra the next day, but because I had to go to Amsterdam that same afternoon, Ansaduta, who was at GBC at the time, asked me to come up to Prabhupada's rooms to get the Gayatri, myself and another devotee. So it was one of the most wonderful experiences of seeing Srila Prabhupada, personally, because we went around 4 o'clock in the afternoon after he had, a little rest. And I remember the walls were all peach, and the sun was coming through the light. And when I walked in, it was this beautiful glow and this beautiful light, and Prabhupada was sitting there. So he asked me to come. He was behind his desk, and he asked me to come to sit next to him. So I sat on his right side, and he gave me the Gayatri mantra, and he started reading it, and he asked me to repeat after him. And then he showed me how to proceed. He proceeded to show me how to put the finger at that exact spot. And I did it the first time right. So I was, I guess, really pleased and got really proud really quickly, I suppose. And so Prabhupada went on to explain certain, like the first line, certain thing. And before I left, he asked me again to redo the finger, and I got it wrong. But to me, it was like, it's something I took, it was an analogy of how immediately one becomes proud. And like I said, it is one of my many shortcomings.
I saw Prabhupada through a friend of mine, Franks, a Jewish friend of mine. He told me that there are public lectures are being given by Prabhupada in Conway Hall. That was in 1969. So as a curiosity, I haven't seen Prabhupada before that. I was curious to see who is this sannyasi who has come from India to preach Krishna consciousness in the West, and in particular UK, because he was very, as I gathered, he was very much influenced by the English education, English etiquette and everything else. So I went there to Conway Hall, and attended the first lecture which he gave, which he addressed to the public who came on that day. And I remember the people who were there were Dhananjaya, Mukund, Gurudas, Shyam Sundar, Malti. A lot of these people were there, and were there to support Srila Prabhupada there. Now, when he came inside the hall, it's a famous hall in London, and when I looked at him, I said, he seems to be a very serious person, because I have seen, or I saw a number of other sannyasis who came from India. I attended some of their meetings and lectures, but none of them impressed me. My impression was they were there just to make some followers and collect some Lakshmi. Prabhupada in his first meeting didn't ask any from the audience any Lakshmi. Gave a lecture. He introduced Krishna consciousness, and a lot of people there were quite impressed with his explanation about the material life and the spiritual life. So I said to myself that he appears to be a genuine sannyasi from India who has not come to collect money. He has come to give something which most of us, and in particular the Indians, don't have it, or they have forgotten it. So that was my first impression.
You know, there were many incidents where I was present and Srila Prabhupada was there, but one point which really has stuck in my mind was when I was given second initiation. It was kind of early-ish 74, and Vrndavan Swami, he did the fire yajna, and the next morning we had to go in one by one to be given Gayatri by Srila Prabhupada. So actually an interesting thing that had happened just a couple of weeks before was Prabhupada called for all the candidates for initiation to come and meet him. So we all went in. There was maybe a dozen of us. And Prabhupada came out into the darshan room in Bhaktivedanta Manor. And Prabhupada says, so, is everyone chanting their rounds? And we all said yes. But there were two young ladies, perhaps even just in their late teens, and they giggled and said, no, we're not chanting our rounds. And Prabhupada really didn't appreciate that. Prabhupada cancelled the initiation for everyone. So you can imagine those young ladies were not popular. Anyway, a couple of weeks later, the initiation happened. So the next morning I went in. I was the first one to go in. It was immediately after Mangalarti in Bhaktivedanta Manor. I went in. I already had my Brahmin thread on. Rabbatanandan had put it on the day before. So I went and offered obeisances on my own. First time I was alone with Srila Prabhupada. And I sort of I was kneeling, I came up a bit and Prabhupada looked at me. And Prabhupada said, why have you got your Brahmin thread on? Strongly. And it just caught me by surprise. I became speechless. I was just sitting there. And Prabhupada saw that. And Prabhupada said, "Who put it on?" I said, "Vrndavan Swami." Prabhupada said, "Why did he put it on? I wanted to put it on you." Then Prabhupada called for the temple president, who was Mukunda Prabhu at the time. So Mukunda was nearby. He came in just a matter of seconds later. And you know, when Prabhupada would come to the Manor, practically everyone would come from all over Europe. There may be 400 or 500 devotees in the Manor right then. And Mukunda, as the president, he was really busy. So Prabhupada called him in and asked him, "Why has this boy got his Brahmin thread on?" And Mukunda became speechless also. And Prabhupada told him, you are the temple president. You're meant to know about these things. Why do you not know? And Mukunda couldn't answer. And then Prabhupada sent him out. The whole experience, it was a very striking experience because I'd never been with Prabhupada before. And his mood was strong. He spoke strongly. He was sort of cutting and questioning why. And he wanted to know why. But I didn't feel that he's angry with me, that he's upset with me. What I felt was that he cares. He's concerned about me. I really felt that he has accepted me, that we have a relationship, and that relationship really means something to him. Even to the point that he pursued the issue, he made an issue of it. He called in the temple president, made an issue of it with him strongly, and questioned him a few times about his role in the whole thing. So it really struck me very deeply, even though I was a bit sort of slightly disturbed by the scenario. But I really felt that I mean something to him. I'm not just another name on a list or something like that. I am a person who he has a relationship with. I mean something to him. He cares about me. He's interested in me. And he really wants to help me. I really felt there was affection there. So when I walked out at the end of all that, I was sort of buzzing a little because of the intensity of it. But what really carried over in my mind, and it carries over till today, is that this is my spiritual master. Even though we'd never met before, and he, in a certain sense, he didn't know who on earth I was, but he did. And he cared, he was concerned, he was interested. He had affection that really went deep into my heart. So after that time, when I was rendering service, I would say, practically always thinking how this is for Prabhupada. It's part of my connection with Prabhupada, my relationship with Srila Prabhupada.
I left London, I went up to Manchester for a while, and Prabhupada was in charge of the temple up there. Actually different people, but mainly him. He was very close to Srila Prabhupada. Every time I saw him in the room with Srila Prabhupada doing kirtan, I don't know if you know him, he was quite famous. He used to play the drum with his leg going. Every time I saw him at Berry Place, Prabhupada would go and pat him on the head because he was so young. He was much younger than me, but he was so, actually, he had so much energy and love for Krishna. And he actually would cry cleaning the floor because it was God's floor. So when I met him, he told me, and I didn't realize at the time it was the same person that I had already met before. He told me about this man who came from the kingdom of God, because I was a Christian, to tell us what God wanted us to do on a daily basis. And I was like, wow, that is amazing. And of course I didn't realize it was the Prabhupada I'd met at that point. But I really took it in, And I just told him, tell me what to do. I was working and everything. So he told me, you know, you have to get up this time, you have to go to bed at that time, you have to do this in this order in the bathroom. So every single thing I could do, I tried to do in small ways, just small things. And I was meditating non-stop. This person that he told me about has told me what God wants, and that if God's pleased, he'll let me go back to that spiritual world. Because when I was young, my dad had told me God's a person, he lives on another planet, and if you're a good girl, you go and live with him when you die. So this was very significant for me, that this man had come from the kingdom of God. And so I actually followed, even though I was working, I've really tried second to second as an experiment. And I have to say that I got the most amazing, deep, incredible realizations that are my foundation to this day. So that was Prabhupada from a distance, just meditating on this amazing person who came. So, yeah.
I was initiated in Vrndavan in 1976, in April. Actually, I had told the temple authorities that I would like to get initiated in Mayapur, because I felt that that is the land where all the mercy is flowing and I needed mercy. But they said, no, your name is on the list for Vrndavan. And I said, oh no, please, for Mayapur. And they said no. So anyway, it had to be Vrndavan. And since then, for some reason, I've always had more of a relationship with Vrndavan. But I went up for my beads, and Prabhupada said, your name is Jagatam Dasi. And I said, excuse me, Srila Prabhupada? I didn't recognize the name. He said, Jagatam Dasi. So it was quite clear. And then after the ceremony, his servant, his secretary, and the temple president came up to me and said, oh, look, that's not your name. Your name is actually Jagatam Adhishtatri. It's in this book, Radha Sahasranam. And they opened the book up and showed me this long name, Jagatam Adhishtatri, which means beloved of the creator of the universes. So it's a name for Radharani. So, but anyway, I used to just, when people asked me my name, I would say Jagatam, because it's so much easier. And if I would sign a letter, I would use the whole name. But what was interesting is when I first joined the temple, I was a feminist. And I was thinking in my mind, oh, I don't want a feminine sounding name. I want a short name and something simple. And that's what I got.
I'd like to actually just tell one or two short little stories about Mohan Prabhu. He was one of the early disciples of Srila Prabhupada. He joined in 72, and he was at the Manor, Bhaktivedanta Manor, when they first acquired the Manor from George Harrison. So when Srila Prabhupada he told me a couple of little stories I'd just like to say. He passed away last year in 2017, having had a brain tumour. So he didn't really get a chance to tell his story. So Srila Prabhupada was visiting one time, and they called him to Prabhupada's rooms to fix his lock on his case. So Srila Prabhupada was in the rooms at the time, and he was walking up and down, very gravely chanting, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. And so the mood that we all had, or many of us had, was great awe and reverence when we went to in the presence of Srila Prabhupada. We felt very small. So he also knocked on the door, opened the door. Prabhupada said, come in. He went in. Come to fix your lock, Srila Prabhupada, sort of mood, And he just, no words, he just nodded with his head and showed him the case. So Mohan is fixing the case. And then Srila Prabhupada spoke to him. I think it's the only time he actually spoke to him, so it was very special for him. Prabhupada said, oh, you are carpenter? And he was just so surprised that Srila Prabhupada should speak to him. He felt very lonely. He was a very humble devotee. And he said, no, Srila Prabhupada, and carried on fixing. Prabhupada just carried on walking up and down, chanting his rounds like that. So afterwards, when he told the story, he would say how he felt that Prabhupada was very like a father. He had that, you know, that feeling like a father, a very kind father, encouraging, forgiving for all our foolishness and all the silly mistakes that we make and our tongue-tiedness. And
my first attendance at one of Srila Prabhupada's lectures here at Bhaktivedanta Manor, I was right at the front, and Prabhupada came into the temple to give this lecture, and he climbed up on the Vyasasana, and as he turned to sit, he looked me right in the eyes, and I knew that he knew everything about me, past, present and future, and I had nothing to hide. I knew that this is what I had to do for the rest of my life, even though I was not initiated at this point. He was Trikalagya.
Srila Prabhupada said, he bent down and he looked, and then we were holding our breath, what did Prabhupada see? And then Prabhupada said, Krishna has no ankle bells. Krishna should always wear ankle bells. And here he showed, to me he showed, especially in deity worship, the being cautious, being careful about the details in the puja, not so much the show but to make sure that whatever Prabhupada has given and told us what to use and which places the deities should be decorated, that it should be done. And very often you see pujaris don't put ankle bells, or here they always wear ankle bells because they know the story.
He was so relaxed and so happy being in Vrndavan, in his home, and acting like a host. So people would come, like devotees were sitting there, and then guests and visitors would come, and different Indian people would come, and whoever came in, he would greet them, and he would talk to them a little bit in Hindi and make them welcome, and he would make sure that everyone got some prasadam. And we were just sitting there, and I felt that I became free from all worries and anxieties by being in Prabhupada's presence. It's like all the worries of the mind, everything disappeared. Just sitting there in Prabhupada's darshan room in Vrndavan and just being with him, it was very, very relaxing and calming and therapeutic for my mind and my soul.
What happened was that the devotees gave out a lot of flyers for advertising his lecture, but unfortunately the weather was very bad on that day, very bad, and so not many people turned up. The usual devotees, they were there. So I think Dhananjay said, Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada, we have given out lot of flyers, but not many people have come today. We are sorry. Prabhupada said, the hall was full. Hall was full with the devotees. And Narad Muni was there. Then I said, well, is he really serious? Is he really serious sannyasi? Because I couldn't see Narad Muni anywhere. I could just see all the white faces there. That was very interesting. That then and because I was not at that stage, believed everything a person came or a preacher came from India. But then I realized that I was not able to observe what Prabhupada was observing. And then later on I realized that Prabhupada is Prabhupada. I'm an ordinary materialistic lawyer in London, you see. So I could only see everything what I could see. If I didn't see, I didn't believe in it.
Yes, well, I remember one very striking experience that I had with Srila Prabhupada. It was in Bhaktivedanta Manor. It was, I would say, the spring of '74. And Prabhupada had a darshan. You know, he would pass through London regularly. And whenever he would pass through, he'd stop at the manor for a few days. I was there. I was the treasurer at the time in the manor. So there was a darshan one afternoon. And there was maybe 10 of us or so, not a large number, in Prabhupada's main darshan room. So Prabhupada was speaking about different things. And then one boy, his name is Achintya Rupa, he asked Prabhupada a question. He actually had a copy of Nectar of Devotion with him, and he read a few sentences from the chapter which is talking about offenses to be avoided, that particular chapter. So he read what Prabhupada had said there, that if you perform what are called seva aparads, there's a few lists of offenses in that chapter. The first couple of lists of maybe 30 or so each, they're seva aparads, which, you know, they're aparads, but they're not so serious like the 10 nam aparads. So he read what Prabhupada said there, that Prabhupada says there, if you commit those seva aparads, then as you continue in your service, the effects may just be sort of cleansed away. But, Prabhupada says there, if you commit any of the 10 offenses against the holy names, then you cannot overcome the reactions. So this devotee read this out. And then he said to Prabhupada, he said, but Srila Prabhupada, isn't there some way to overcome those reactions against the 10 offenses? And Prabhupada looked at him. He gave him one of those piercing looks. And Srila Prabhupada said, you are asking this question because you want to offend. You want to offend, and then you want to just do something to get free from the reactions. But no, you must not do like that. And Prabhupada said, you must stop offending. No more offenses. So that was really quite an experience for all of us. I think the lesson is quite obvious, that even though in some literatures like Harinam Chintamani there's talk about if you commit this one of the 10 offenses you can do something and that'll be okay. But Prabhupada, he was insisting and expecting and emphasizing how essential it is to avoid those offenses completely and not just sort of tolerate being offensive to some degree. Then, during that same darshan, different devotees were asking different questions. One devotee asked Prabhupada that if you are going out and preaching and distributing books and so on, and you do something wrong, which there should be a reaction for, does the reaction, because you're going out preaching, does the reaction get cleansed away more quickly than if you're living in a temple and you do some similar type of wrong things somehow? And Srila Prabhupada immediately answered, yes. If you're going out preaching, then the reaction will just be immediately cleansed away. Whereas if you're doing service in the temple, you may have to take that reaction. Yes, that was a very interesting experience. Then, one devotee asked Prabhupada, what should we say when we distribute your books? How should we get people to take the books? Srila Prabhupada stood up, picked up a book, went over to a devotee, gave the devotee the book, and Prabhupada then spoke as if he's distributing the book. Prabhupada said, "My dear sir, I can see you are very intelligent. In fact, I think you are the most intelligent person I have met all day. And my dear sir, I have just one request of you. Please forget all your nonsense and read this book." That was Prabhupada's demonstration how to do book distribution.
I asked a few. One of them was the questions of karma and why certain things happen in the material world, and let's say corruption, civil wars, poverty, hunger, and he said those questions, the answer to them was that they're created by man himself. There was no need for this to happen. If people followed Krishna consciousness, there would not be this scenario. There would be peace. There would be enough for everyone to eat. And but he also answered the question I asked him once about the issue of eating meat, and he said, "This is the question I was looking for a long, long time. What's wrong about eating meat?" And he answered it. And what he said was that if you go to the abattoir, you see the chemical and the emotional trauma that the animal goes through, then it affects you. And what he said was that when you approach a cow or a sheep or an animal to slaughter it for self-consumption, they feel the pain. They know that you're coming to kill them. They're scared. They fear it. And the human being is eating fear. They're not eating meat, they are eating fear. And that's why it is explained why man himself is such an aggressive human being, an aggressive animal, because they've been existing on eating fear. And that's how he explained it. When you eat a steak and all that blood is actually contains fear. That's how he explained it.
I think, like the majority of devotees in ISKCON who didn't have much personal association, we didn't notice that Prabhupada was somewhere else. We felt Prabhupada's presence so much through the books, through the purport, through the association. I was very fortunate in Amsterdam. We had Patita Dharan, Kula Shekhar, Tulsi Das, and then Bhakti Jan, and then Manibanda, and we had all these devotees. And so we felt Prabhupada's presence through everybody, like most devotees. It was almost like there was no difference, as Prabhupada said, and that's how most of us felt Prabhupada's presence. It wasn't until much later when Prabhupada started to get weak, and then I realized I haven't had enough personal association, therefore I want to get to India. Because that's when Prabhupada went to India, and we kind of knew that he wasn't probably going to make it to the West. So that's when I had my, the personal association, or the closest profound experiences when I went to India.
We had the music of George Harrison. I had lived at the college very near where George Harrison was living in Henley. And I'd driven up to see him one day because I had this album, George Harrison, Family and Friends, and Ravi Shankar, George Harrison, Family and Friends, and it had a song on it called Krishna, Where Are You? Beautiful flute playing. And I drove up to George Harrison's house on the strength of hearing this to just ask him about this, because I'd been reading yoga, different books. I actually had written off for the perfection of yoga, and the BTG I got given, I cut out the mantra, which was in pink and white and black, and stuck it on my dashboard in my car, and would chant with the tape of the album which I'd been given by Bhakti Chaitanya Maharaj on a little cassette in my car. I'd chant at the highest volume I could the India album with the Hare Krishna mantra on the screen, and I had no idea what this was meant or anything, but I would chant every day very, very loudly. And I guess that's what made me a devotee, the chanting. And Prabhupada said, never give up on this chanting. Never give up on this chanting, because it will reveal everything. Everything's contained within this mantra.
Everyone was very happy, sort of glowing, and the German Sankirtan party, they had a real energy. They were a powerful team. And there they were in front of Prabhupada, and Prabhupada looked at them. And Srila Prabhupada said, so, what is the main thing? And so many of them put up their hands. Book distribution, Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada said, no. What is the main thing? They became a little taken aback. And some suggested, well, preaching, Srila Prabhupada, or chanting, or a few suggestions were made. But they were a bit taken aback that book distribution was not the main thing. Then Prabhupada said, the main thing is you must read these books. I have written these books for you. And Prabhupada actually, as I recall, mentioned that it will not be very good if you go out distributing the books and the people ask you, what is this book about? And you say, I do not know, but it is a very good book, and you should take it. Yes.
Then after a few months, I went to Mayapur. This was at 1976 Gaur festival, and Prabhupada was there. So this was a new project. There was only the temple and the lotus building there. And in the evenings, we would attend darshan again in Prabhupada's room in the lotus building. So that was more intimate, smaller, because it was quite untamed and wild still. That project, you know, that big land was there, and there were actually rumors about ghosts, even about this Brahman Rakshasas who could actually hurt people and even kill people. So it was kind of a dangerous feeling. It was quite kind of exciting, but Prabhupada was very protective of us. We really felt safe under his protection. He took special measures for the protection of the devotees, like having this Shania music playing in the morning and evening, and also when we were taking darshan in his room in the evening, it was a little bit dark, dusk, and a pandit would come around with a lamp of frankincense billowing and blowing the conch shell. And he would go around all of the buildings, and including in Prabhupada's rooms. So we felt even it was a dangerous situation that anyone could come there, dacoits or anything. It was quite a dangerous area. But we felt safe under Prabhupada's shelter. And he would, during the morning programs in the temple, he would always ring the bell when he was circumambulating the deities, Radha Madhava, and ring the bell, and he was very happy. And he was giving classes. That was at the time when the seventh canto just came out, and he was giving classes about the pastimes of Lord Nrsingadev and Prahlad, and speaking a lot about Prahlad. And those were very powerful lectures, and speaking about Prahlad. And it was like, Prabhupada was like Prahlad in one sense, you know, being fearless. All of in his preaching and his traveling, and traveling to the West alone in this advanced age, and then starting these projects in India in this situation. So we could feel that power and that fearlessness in his voice, just like Prahlad Maharaj being sheltered by Lord Nrsingadev.
Whenever I'd meet Srila Prabhupada and be face to face with him, the tears would always come. And so Srila Prabhupada said my name, Judy. And when I came, he asked for the principles. And then he held the beads up and he was chanting on them. And then he said, your name is Jesta Devi Dasi. And he said, Jesta means the eldest. And these are the beads he gave me and that he chanted on. When I was looking up at Srila Prabhupada's eyes, they looked like they were full of tears. They were really beautiful. Like he was like emotional, like a spiritual emotion, and yeah, glowing wet with tears.
So I have to understand that when the temple opened, we were still very young, and there was like 5-6 people in charge of the temple, Gunanava, so Rabi, Akshayananda, Dhananjaya Prabhu, Gunanava as well, because all of a sudden, this is the first big temple Prabhupada had opened, and we're in Vrndavan, in the midst of all the smarter Brahmana and everything, so we had to do everything just so. So Prabhupada wanted us to represent him, and so they could not find fault with us and accept us, So every morning after Mangalartik, we used to go to that walk, Shatikara Road, which is now Bhaktivedanta Marg. And Prabhupada used to ask all of us individually our different services, how we got on with it. Like just for me, for instance, it's just a small thing because I was doing the sewing. And so he was asking everyone when it was my turn. I said, oh, I go every day to the bazaar to get like cloths, thread, or this and that. And that's when he said, well, you make a list and you just go once a week. It was 1 rupee at the time, but something like that. So that was a small thing. Anyway, so at that time, Srila Prabhupada found out that that Balaram's plow was stolen, and it was the second time, and it was made of like silver. So Prabhupada asked at the time the head pujari, and the head pujari said, well, it was somehow, anyway, he basically said they were badmas, rascal, whoever took it, and they're really gonna suffer for stealing Krishna Singh. And Prabhupada said, yes, but you will have to suffer half the consequences because it was under his watch and it was his responsibility. He accepted that responsibility to that service. And by not doing it the way it should have been done, he facilitated for the thief, the chore, enabled him to steal a thing. So that was a pretty heavy lesson that we have to take responsibilities.
So when Prabhupada came, I went there. I had already I had a lot of respect about or of Prabhupada after attending some of his lectures that gone before. So I went to the temple, and he was sitting there upon the first floor, his desk. I went there, looked at him very close. I mean, so far I was looking at him from 70, 80 feet, 90 feet in Conway Hall, but now that was very close. I looked at him very carefully, just to confirm my ideas that he is definitely a genuine sannyasi. So he talked to me, he said, what is your name? We know you are a lawyer. I said, yes, I'm a lawyer. We also know that you come from a Vaishnava background, from the devotees told me. I said, yes, I am. So he asked me all the details about myself, my family. And he said, good thing you are already from Sri Sampradaya. You are a devotee, so you know what a devotee should, I can't now exactly remember what he said to me, but it was that I'm a devotee, therefore come from a devotee background, devotee family. So I would appreciate, or I would be able to appreciate the problem the devotees are having. With my slight spiritual background and the material background, I knew where the problems were. So he explained to me that we have got this temple in Bury Place, and which is the heart of London, very close to the heart of London. So we have been given notice to close the temple down in 28 days. I said, I didn't say at that time, Prabhupada. I said, Swamiji, it's a very short time, 28 days. So I said, and he said, Goodman and Goodman are a bit expensive, and our devotees don't have lots of money, we collect. So I guessed, I understood that Prabhupada, or Srila Prabhupada now, you see, was expecting work from us, either for very low fee or nothing whatsoever. Well, after talking to him for some time, I was with him for about 35 minutes. He impressed me that it is very important that we should, and I should help him, you see, in this matter.
I always felt that I would only speak when spoken to, out of respect. So if he said to me, Jai Hari, how are you? What are you doing? Then I would answer him that particular question. I would say, I distributed 20 Krishna books over the weekend, or whatever, and he would say, that is wonderful. You are the best book distributor in Europe. How can you sell 20 Krishna books in one weekend? This is when the book came out. And I'd say, well, Srila Prabhupada, I actually don't just give the book, sell the books. I sell the prasadam as well to go with the book. I give them a Simply Wonderful. So when they have a taste of the Simply Wonderful, they want to taste of the Krishna book as well. And he just laughed. He said, that's the way we should sell our books. That is the secret of selling our books, with prasadam.
You know, when I was in Srila Prabhupada's company, which was quite a number of times, particularly at Bhaktivedanta Manor, the main thing that really struck me was his mood of mercy and concern and interest in his disciples. I recall when it may have been his last, if not his last, one of his very last visits to the manor, either late 76 or sometime 77. Jayatirtha was the GBC. And so Prabhupada arrived, went into his rooms in the manor, and a number of us, as many as could, we went in, and Jayatirtha was there. And Jayatirtha was right next to Srila Prabhupada. And Prabhupada put his hand on his head and sort of, ruffled his hair or whatever, like that, stroked his head, and said, your name is Jayatirtha. Tirtha means holy place. People take shelter of the Tirthas. I've come to take shelter of you. Yeah, Prabhupada said that. I've come to take shelter of you. And, the sort of not just the warmth of relationship, but the humility, the genuineness that he actually felt like that. He wasn't being sort of patronizing or trying to just encourage him. He actually felt like that.
So then later in 76 in the summer, I was still in Vrndavan, and I was asked if I would like to return to London to collect Lakshmi for Vrndavan. So I agreed to do that because I had some desire to go out and preach and spread Krishna consciousness, because I'd been inspired by Prabhupada's preaching and by his example as well of how he left Vrndavan and came to the West to give Krishna consciousness. So I wanted to try to follow in that mood. So I came to the Manor, and actually it so happened that the day I arrived, Prabhupada had arrived here the day before, and he was at the Manor. And so I started going out, and then in the evenings we would take darshan. In the mornings he was giving classes. And at that time, my father came to see me because he hadn't seen me for over a year. So he was waiting for me, and I was out on Sankirtan. And there were some newspaper reporters that came to interview Srila Prabhupada. So there was a devotee taking them around, and they invited my father to go, and he said, "No, I'll wait here because I'm waiting for my daughter." And this devotee took them around, and then they came back, and then he was taking them up to Prabhupada's room. So then my father said, "Okay, I'll come with you," because he wanted to meet Prabhupada. He wanted to meet this person who had stolen his daughter away from him. So he came into the room and he sat down here in Prabhupada's darshan room while they were doing the interview. And he just sat there and waited, and then they left, and some other people came in, and there were different people coming to see Prabhupada. And he introduced himself to Prabhupada, that I am the father of Jagannatheshwari, who you initiated her in Vrndavan. And Prabhupada said, "She is a very fortunate girl." Of course, when my father told me this afterwards, I was in ecstasy. But the way Prabhupada engaged my father in conversation was very endearing. He didn't try to preach to him, but he was actually asking him questions, because my father's a teacher and he's quite knowledgeable. So Prabhupada was asking him different questions about England and about just different sort of general knowledge about the country, like that. And my father saw that some Indian people were coming in, and then after they took darshan of Prabhupada and talked with him, then they would walk out backwards, just out of respect. They didn't want to show their back to Prabhupada. So when my father left, then he did the same thing. He walked out backwards. But he was very impressed by Prabhupada, and he's always respected him. And it was really good for me that my father got to meet Prabhupada and to understand that what kind of a person this is, and that he's not some kind of crazy person, but a gentleman. And so he was happy, and I was also happy.
So one time, when Prabhupada was here in the Manor at that time, people would go on the morning walks. And one morning I was going to go on the morning walk, and it was raining, and I hadn't actually put a coat or shoes on. I was little, I'm going on the morning walk with Prabhupada. So Prabhupada came down the stairs, and I was waiting in the Manor, in the temple room. Prabhupada came by, and when he stood by me, how he knew I was going on the morning walk, he stood right in front of me with his face like this to mine, and he said, you are going on the morning walk? And I said, yes, Srila Prabhupada. And he said, you are not properly dressed. So I was amazed by that. It just made me realize how he came with such a big mission for the whole world. But still, even on the small, seemingly small things, he was so not just caring, but he noticed everything about everyone. And then he gave personally, you know, so, yeah.
And like I said, whenever somebody would do a service, they would always do it to their best of their ability. So one of the devotees was leading the kirtan and was playing the drum and fancy beats and all, you know, a little bit showing off, you know. And Srila Prabhupada said, as the kirtan stopped, he went, you do not know how to sing Hari Haraya Nama Krishna? He said, there should never be a kirtan without Hari Haraya Nama Krishna. You know the song? Yadavaya Namaha. He said that, and I thought it was, in a way, was also showing that Prabhupada wasn't impressed, you know. But we did. We always tried to do the service to our best, you know, so Srila Prabhupada would be pleased.
I always looked at Srila Prabhupada as like a father figure, somebody I could respect, somebody who knew me better than I knew myself. That's the term I was looking for. And somehow he did. He knew me better than I knew myself. And whereas I was thinking of tomorrow or the next week, he was thinking about me the next year. He was planning my future, basically, and, you know, or whatever, because he knew that I had certain qualities, whether it's in business, entrepreneurial, management, marketing, and he was, you know, showing me the way to channel it, basically. And because of those ways of him showing me those, I was becoming more and more braver. I wasn't scared. I wasn't scared to organize a book stand in Frankfurt, Germany, for the Frankfurt Book Fair. So I organized that myself single-handedly with advice from Mukunda Gurdas and Shamsundar, and just went to Frankfurt selling the books with another devotee. You know, we had a stand, all the ISKCON Krishna books, you know, in Frankfurt, and it was a road into Germany, you know.
It's one of the few times that Prabhupada got very angry. It was in Amsterdam. And so many things were lacking in the installation of the deities, were not done, whatever they were. And Prabhupada did not get angry at the devotee in question that got this, actually to the temple president. So that was an important lesson, that it's always, he was the president in charge of the temple, and he did not see to it to the point that it should have been done. He did not at all chastise the person that have made, you know, the few mistakes and certain things were lacking in the preparation of the installation he got. And then another time, in the same blame story, it was in Vrndavan, and Prabhupada had asked this, this devotee who was a very good cook. You know, she used to make chavda, you know, this, and put it in the tiffin, so when Prabhupada could travel, he could have some prasad. Excuse me. And she was very, very good at it. So he had asked his servant at the time to learn a recipe exactly so you know, it could be done. And I happened to be in a room when he brought it to Srila Prabhupada, me, that's other devotee and myself, and it wasn't, something was missing, was too much salt or something. And that immediately said, but she told me to do it. Big mistake, never. And most certainly, the devotee in question definitely, you know, might have like told him to do too much this or less of that. But again, I wasn't like, you do not, you never. Even, like I said, even the case would be that, you know, it was not your fault, never.
In 1976, in the Manor, it's Vyasa Puja. I stand up, I have the flowers, I gather up all my devotion to Prabhupada, my steel-hearted devotion, and I begin to offer to Prabhupada. And he turns and he looks at me and he catches my eye and he holds it and a smile comes and he understands everything. He doesn't need to say a word. I understand that he understood. I'd struggled, I'd come, I'd wanted Swamiji. I'd wanted to sit with Swamiji. And the time had changed. It wasn't the early days. Prabhupada was the Acharya, the guru of hundreds and thousands of disciples. He was busy. He couldn't give that time, but he conveyed that to me wordlessly. And that was the most wonderful, sublime experience. And that was the last time I met Srila Prabhupada. Maybe, I don't know, but that was, he answered, he recognized my struggle to be with my spiritual master. Thank you, Srila Prabhupada.
So when I came up the stairs, Prabhupada had already gone up to take rest. I was so devastated. So I went downstairs and I had rounds to do. And we were busy in the temple, so I knew I had to chant my rounds, but I was crying. I was really crying. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. I was crying and crying, and Shrutakirti, who was his servant, then came down. And he said, "Oh, why are you crying?" I said, "I so wanted to hear Srila Prabhupada, but actually he's gone, and I think he was going straight after that, and now I can't hear him." So Shrutakirti, being very sweet as he was, he said, "Oh, you're like the gopis crying. I'll go and tell Prabhupada, do you want to see him?" And I said, "Oh, no, I'm too nervous, please." So he went upstairs, and then he came down afterwards, and he said, "Prabhupada wants to see you." So I was like, oh no. So anyway, I went up there with big bleary face, and I went into the room, and I paid my obeisances, and then Prabhupada asked my name. I said my name. And then Prabhupada said something, but I couldn't tell what he said. I said, what? And then Prabhupada, he just circled round, and in that room, there was a mattress on the floor, and Prabhupada was sleeping on that mattress. And so he came around, and he lay on the mattress, a bit like, you know, like this, with his elbow up and his feet up. And then I was just facing him like this, looking at him. And then he said, "Thank you very much." Well, I was so shocked when he said that. I thought, why is he thanking me? You know, I presumed because I would think I was the only girl on Sankirtan at that time from that place. But I thought, why is he thanking me? So that, I said, no, thank you for everything you've given us, you know. A very simple exchange, but then I went out. And then Shrutakirti came, and he said to me, "Prabhupada just said something about you." And I was seeing how Prabhupada was so grateful for whatever little service we did, that Prabhupada actually said to Shrutakirti, he came out and told me, "She's a great sage, Krishna will bless her." So that is very amazing that he would be so kind to say that. You know, the mercy of Srila Prabhupada and the kindness.
Prabhupada was coming from Vrndavan through Delhi. And then we met Prabhupada at the airport. And when Prabhupada was in the Manor that time, physically he was severely indisposed. His body looked bad. He was practically emaciated, very thin. I'd never seen him look like that before. And he was very frail. He couldn't really walk much. When he came out of the airport terminal, he was in a wheelchair. They had to carry him around the Manor when he'd come to the temple. But I remember he'd be carried down on a palanquin to the temple, and he would sit in front of the Vyasasan, basically, or near the Vyasasan, in the temple room in Bhaktivedanta Manor. And he'd sit there and look at the devotees. The GBC, I think Hansadutta was the GBC. Bhagavan was there. They told us, when Prabhupada comes, we're going to have a Guru Puja, but keep the kirtan very gentle. We don't want to sort of, affect Prabhupada emotionally. So every morning the Guru Puja would start and the kirtan would just take off and Prabhupada would just sit there, more or less motionless, without any movement. He'd just look at the devotees and slowly look around as this kirtan was going on, and tears would just run down his cheeks and just drip, drip, drip off his chin, just constantly. I'd never seen that before. And he'd just sit there. Sometimes he'd raise his hands like that, otherwise he'd just sit there and look. And it was just so clear that he loved the devotees, and he really cared, and he really appreciated the devotees. They meant like the world to him, actually. So that was a very amazing experience.
One can't see any material desire in Prabhupada. Nobody can point out material desire. My whole impression of meeting him, I think must have met him 6 times at least, was he was a self-realized sannyasi who has no motive as far as he himself was concerned. His desire and motives were all to tell everybody about Krishna. And whenever I had meetings with him, he always said, Krishna will do it. Krishna will do it. Don't worry, Krishna will do it. He depended totally on Krishna, and I think Krishna was totally on his side all the time. Although a lot of people did not understand that he was what he has done in the world, no other person has done it. No other person has done it. Great saint, people, impersonalists like Vivekananda and so many others came. They came and gone. They are only in the minds of few people in the world. But Prabhupada, because he was totally, even that is the wrong description. He was totally immersed in Krishna. He wouldn't talk anything other than Krishna. And anything, if he was talking something, it was connected with Krishna. He will bring Krishna into everything. So, even during my discussion, he said, Krishna did it. It was difficult for me to accept at that time. Very difficult. I do come from a Western background, but covered up with material desires. So, I was very lucky to have darshan of Prabhupada face to face and one to one.
Prabhupada completely the purity of his sincerity and his surrender was so authentic. And when you read about the history, because I'm quite interested in the whole guru phenomena, what Prabhupada did at his age, with no backing, with just sincerity and faith, and Mullah Pakriti's book about all the people, and one of the things that struck me in that book was everybody thought that Prabhupada was mad. Not mad, but yeah, kind of, they just saw him as a kind of sincere Bengali devotee of Krishna, but nobody thought he was going to become this charismatic leader that was going to kind of bring this kind of spiritual revolution and bring Krishna to the west. And not only that, I'm loved the verse Namaste Saraswati Deva Gauravani Pacharine Nirvisesha Shunyavadi Paskachada Satarine. Because really, when you look at the whole story of the East-West dialogue between that, what India has to offer the world, Prabhupada was the spearhead and the only person to introduce theistic Vaishnava Bhakti doctrine. And when I have to give credit to Vrndavan Swami for understanding that and presenting it so well at that Windsor Free Festival, that the first time I heard it, I went, wow, that is such an amazing concept. I was expecting all those cliches where, oh, like rivers going into the ocean, like the drops and merging. And no, you know, and Roberta was saying, well, you know, God is not just light, you know, and he went into, and it was the philosophy of Achincha Beda Peda, apart from the bhakti and the culture, because I'm very, I love the bhakti culture, I'm an artist, the music, the art, the architecture, the poetry. Prabhupada gave us all of this in such a kind of understated way. And to realize that it's become so massive, the Krishna phenomena, where it's gone, that without Prabhupada, none of this would have happened.
There were so many qualities of Prabhupada that were unique. You would see pictures of him in the BTG when he was in the snow, with his Swami hat on, in New York in the blizzard and snow, it's like alone in the street, just looking like this over his shoulder and walking. And you'd think, how is this possible? That someone has come this great distance to give us this Maha Mantra, to give us the spiritual mantra, the Maha Mantra, in which everything is contained.
What I've learned from Srila Prabhupada is that there's been lots of ups and downs in life, and losing loved ones, and god sisters, god brothers that I was very close to, and you know, it's like a bit of your heart goes. But because of, I mean, if I didn't have Srila Prabhupada and his teachings in my life and the Maha Mantra, then I wouldn't have been able to go on. Just I would completely lose it. But because of Srila Prabhupada, his teachings and his life lessons are there every day to take shelter of, and it's helped me through the deepest and darkest times. It's like one time I was walking around the temple, and it was like I actually heard Srila Prabhupada's cane. It was like Prabhupada said, I'll be with you as much as you, like he said, I'm never separated from my spiritual master. And I don't have those realizations, I'm not that advanced, but if I take shelter of the teachings and the philosophy and, you know, the memories that we have of Srila Prabhupada, then, you know, he's always with us. He said that. And I've seen devotees going through bodily, you know, I've been with quite a few devotees when they were leaving the bodies, because that was my service to help devotees. And somehow or other, Krishna always arranges that everything is like a dance. And devotees, just the kirtan is there, all the devotees are around, and the devotees, like this one devotee was Samba, and when he left his body, the people and the man in the bed next door, he said, oh, I'm so glad that we got to hear. It was like there was a chariot coming from heaven, he said. And the whole room was so uplifted, and we were afraid, security was there as well, and we were afraid that, you know, we disturbed the person, but he could actually feel the air lifting, you know, we chanting in the Sringadev prayers. And this is the gift that Prabhupada has given.
As a 67-year-old senior person, it's Prabhupada's friendship, the feeling of intimate friendship and acceptance. And the acceptance, he's completely qualified to take us back to Godhead. Of that, I do not doubt.
I suppose the quality that, first quality that comes to mind that stands out of Prabhupada is his love and his compassion. And I think that that's what made him come to the West and save all of us. Because although on one level he was simply following the orders of his guru and the desire of his guru to preach in English, but internally also to be able to do that at that age, the compassion that he had was amazing. And that could be felt in his presence, that could really be visibly felt, because he was tirelessly giving himself to us.
What you felt when you were with Srila Prabhupada is that you were in the presence of someone who was pure. That's the word, pure.
So I want to say that our Srila Prabhupada actually did give everything, completely. So sometimes devotees quote things that were said in the 60s as to what we should and shouldn't do, maybe about going a little deeper, perhaps going towards looking at Raganuga Bhakti and what does it mean. So for younger devotees, definitely, you know, that is not appropriate. But for older devotees, many of my godbrothers and godsisters have already left their body. I'm 70 years old. Prabhupada said, work hard now, samadhi later. And in Srila Prabhupada's books, when we look in Chaitanya Charitamrita, he actually gives all the information what to do if we want to go that step further. He tells us to read Brihad Bhagavatamrita. He tells us to read Ujjvala Nilamani. He mentions actually the 10th canto commentaries of the previous acharyas and the 6 Goswamis' books. So I feel that Prabhupada wanted to give us this. He did give everything. You know, sometimes it's like we think we can't progress, but Prabhupada was so potent. He had the ability, even after leaving the planet, to move us forward, to be able to go to that full depth that he wanted to take us back home to Godhead. So I just wanted to say that this is our Prabhupada's true glory. He did give us everything.
So when I think about Srila Prabhupada, it's the great compassion and love that he exhibited for all of us in so many ways. I also admire him for his self-assurance that he always displayed in every situation. This was always like something, wow, this man, this is someone you could trust. This is someone who knew what he wanted, where he was going, and that great faith that he had in Krishna. Krishna was real for him, and because we believed in him, then Krishna became real for us too. Hare Krishna.
So England was the last place that Prabhupada visited in his touring before he left this world, and I was here at the time. I was staying at, I think it was at Bury Place at the time, doing Sankirtan with all the ladies there. And of course we were invited to come over to the Manor and stay while Srila Prabhupada was here. And it was a very devastating time for us because it was shocking to see, you know, how his body had diminished in size so much. And but many people have told this story, how he was carried down in a palanquin, which is right here, and he would sit in the Vyasasan area, and we would all sing Sri Guru Charana Padma. And many devotees recounted how during that very special time when Prabhupada wasn't speaking, but he was looking at each and every devotee. And I, myself, don't remember him looking at me. And I remember that I felt like I was in Maya that time because I was struggling a lot in my spiritual life. Not my spiritual life, but I was struggling on Sankirtan, and you know, and my mind was really getting the better of me. And I do remember that he didn't look at me, and in the years past, I heard devotees saying, oh, but he gave me that special look, and I didn't get it. So after some time, I prayed to Srila Prabhupada. Not pray, but I just started speaking to him. You didn't look at me, and I was feeling so sad about that, and I was thinking about it a lot. And then one day, he appeared to me in his beautiful, beautiful form, sitting down, and he gave me the most beautiful oceanic smile, like the lady from Pennsylvania said, oceanic. He just sat there and gave me the most beautiful, all-encompassing, loving, compassionate smile. So then I knew that, again, he's not an ordinary person, he's Jagat Guru, he can hear your prayers. Sometimes devotees take initiation from different gurus who are advanced and advancing, but maybe they cannot appear in your vision or your dreams or like that. But Srila Prabhupada is on a different category altogether. He's the highest level of Uttama Adhikari. So, you know, so many years have gone past, maybe 40, almost 45 years for me, and we've all had our ups and downs, but we can never forget Srila Prabhupada and how much love he had for us. That his love is not a material love. It's a pure, transcendental love, which is born of the compassion that comes from Srimati Radhika herself. And that, because of that, we're his children and we feel so cared for.
Jai Anil